Okay, great. So we're really excited to have Dave Daniels speak today. Uh, uh, and Dave is an expert on product launches, and that's what he's going to be talking to us about. Dave was a long time instructor at Pragmatic Marketing, and also he now has a company called BrainKraft, and you can check it out. They specialize basically in product launches, and it's something that I'm personally very interested in. I have a product launch coming up in a couple of months, so this would be this is really timely, and I'm sure for many of you, uh, product launches are things that you have to deal with. Actually, every product manager has to deal with at some point or the other, and depending upon your organization, you're either leading the product launch or you're helping your product marketing folks to lead the product launch. But whatever the case may be, Dave has a lot of insights about what makes a successful product launch, what are the lies about product launch, what you should watch out for, and what the do's and don'ts of product launches basically. And Dave is the expert on that. So it's all yours, Dave.
All right. Well, thank you for having me, everybody. And Devashish, that was an excellent intro. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here now. Are we good on seeing the screen?
Yep.
All right, excellent. Yeah, as was mentioned, you're either going to be playing one of two roles in a launch. You're either going to be the field general who's completely accountable for making it all happen, or you're going to be a major contributor on that team. So some companies will have product marketing taking the lead on this, and others don't. So there's a wide variety of approaches, which I'm sure just in the audience tonight, there'll be a lot of different experiences from different companies. But the thing I want to talk to you about today is, I narrowed this down. I really had like 6 or 8 lies, and I knew I wouldn't have enough time to cover them all. So I narrowed it down to a nice prime number of 3. So what are the 3 big lies about launching new products? So, I've fortunately or unfortunately, as it were, I've had a lot of direct experience in being accountable for launching products. Some were relatively small, and some were relatively big and global, multinational, and all that. And but during my tenure at Pragmatic Marketing, I was there over almost 12 years, a little over 12 years, and I got to work with thousands of people. I was trying to come up with the count, but I think it was in the 8 or 10,000 range, and hundreds of companies. And I'm almost certain that in the audience tonight, there's probably at least one person who was probably in one of my classes that I taught in the Bay Area. So here's what I want you to think about launch. This is what happens quite a bit. Does anybody know what that thing is? It's a trebuchet. And a trebuchet is this medieval thing that it's a medieval weapon. And what we used to do is, thanks, Jim. Yeah, it is. They used to put like boulders and flaming material, and they'd launch it in very long distances to try to pulverize their enemy. And there's a lot of companies that do what I would call the trebuchet launch. And the trebuchet launch looks something like this. So if you've experienced it, just as I explain it, feel free to put a thumbs up in the chat. So some group, typically in the product realm, R&D, engineering, development, whatever you call them, works hard and feverishly to get the product done. And on Friday, they load up the product and they stick it on the trebuchet and they light it on fire, and boom, they knock it over the wall and they send it over to marketing with a love note that says, hey, the product's done. We're ready to launch on Monday, Tuesday at the latest. And, we hope you'll be ready. So marketing, grouses and they grumble and they work all weekend long and they try to get a few things done. They update the website, get it ready, maybe get a few sales tools done. And then they put it on their trebuchet and light it on fire and fling it over to sales with a love note that says, hey, we're launching next week. So, here's everything we got for you. I hope it works out. Love you, mean it. Send us a note if you need any help. And that, my friends, is the Trebuchet launch. It's like we spend all of this energy building the product and all of the resources and all the time. And then launching the product is like an afterthought. It's like, oh, yeah, we got to have that meeting with marketing. Oh, man, I forgot. Did anybody talk to finance? How about legal? Right? So all of this is going on. So let's look a couple of things. And I think what we need to start with is a good basic foundation. And I want to talk to you about what the color of the sky is in my world. So when I say product launch, we're on the same page. Because I've been in a lot of companies, and when you say launch, I'd get dozens of different answers of what that is. So what's a product launch in my world? Well, a product launch, and by the way, let's expand that a little bit. A successful product launch involves the following. So a successful product launch is a coordinated effort to bring a product to market that accelerates business objectives. All right, so think about that. Why would we launch a product if it didn't help our business or our product in some meaningful way, some meaningful, measurable way? So a product launch is not a race to update the website or build a bunch of deliverables that match some kind of template that everybody wants and then toss it over the wall. It's really a thoughtful process that says, hey, what are we trying to accomplish with this? How will we measure that? And who do we need to get involved to make sure that that happens? That, to me, is a successful launch. Coordinated effort accelerates business objectives. So keep that in mind as I go through the rest of my presentation. So people use different terms and there are different kinds of launches just at a very macro level. So at the macro level, we have a new product introduction. That's what we get most excited about, right? So we built something brand new. We're super excited. We got funding to make it happen, and we're racing to get the product out the door. It's something new we've never sold before. So that's a new product introduction. And since we're in tech and we love acronyms, most people refer to this as NPI. This is our NPI process. Another version of a launch is a new product introduction. So it's new market introduction, excuse me. And that's when we take an existing product, maybe massage it around the edges, do something new to it so we can go after another market that we have not served before. Maybe there's a different buyer, different users, different requirements, but it's the same product. The next one is a version launch. And most of us do a lot of these. That is, we have an existing product that's in the marketplace and we queue up a bunch of major features and we bundle it into something that we call a version. And we make a big splash and we try to accelerate growth in our product. Or for some of you, it may not be acceleration, it might be hanging on for dear life. So sometimes we launch products just to stem the churn, right? Keep our customers at bay. And then the fourth one is a feature launch. Sometimes one single feature is so compelling that we want to tell the world about it from the rooftops. It's not a group of features, so it isn't really a version launch. And for some of you, this is a subtle difference between version and feature launch. But the way I think of feature launch is it's just one big thing that we're going to talk about. All right. So setting some foundational knowledge here for everybody. Now, I'm going to get a little mathy for you for like maybe 30 seconds. So no one freak out if math wasn't your bestest thing in school. I tend to gravitate in that direction because my educational background is in computer science and mathematics. So I like to throw a little math in there every now and then just to kind of mix things up. So does anybody know what that formula is? Do you remember this from physics? Anybody put that in the chat? What do you think that is? What does it remind you of? Come on, I am among my friends. Thank you. Acceleration. Yes. All right. Sander was the first one in. Excellent. So acceleration is the change in velocity over the change in time. And that's what we're looking for in a launch, is we're looking for acceleration, right? So what does that look like though? I tend to be more of a visual learner than with words. I like to see pictures. So if we take this, the graph looks something like this. It could bend up a little faster or be a little more gentle, but it curves up nicely like that. And this is the expectation that we're looking for, our leadership is looking for, right? They want to see it look like this. This is what they don't want to see. Where it gets a little going, you know, there's a little bit of energy and a little bit of excitement, and then it flattens out, and then it might even start to dip down. So for those of you who are a little bit more experienced at launching products, when you have a curve that looks like this, what happens to your sales team? How do they react? They want a hockey stick. Yeah. Well, it's sort of hockey stick. You could bend it in. We could change the math a little bit to get a hockey stick. So what does sales do? Let me tell you what they do. They start with, well, you know, we've been trying this and it's not working out and customers don't want it and it doesn't really have the right feature set and marketing's not generating enough leads for us and blah, 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 blah. And you're in those meetings and you're like, how did we work so hard to get the product to this point and it just completely unravel right in front of us? So maybe some of you have had excellent product launches all this time in your career, and thank goodness. I like the way you said that, Sander. I will not repeat it, but there it is in the chat. That's exactly what happens. And here's the other problem you have. What happens when you go back and you work with product and you work with development and you work with the entire team and you get it right and you finally get what was missing in the product and then you want to go out the door again? It's a funny thing, everybody. It seems like it's easier to get a second chance with the market than it is to get a second chance with your sales team, because they won't touch that thing with a 10-foot pole the next time around. Maybe a few will, but most of them won't. They're just like, look, I got a quota to make. Thanks, Dave. That was great. Thanks for doing that. But man, if I don't make my quota, I'm out of here. So maybe I'll look at it next year. So let's move on. What are factors that affect acceleration? Things we need to be thinking about. One is energy. Now, where does energy appear? Energy can be both from a push point of view, us pushing it out the door, and there's also the pull, excuse me, the pull from the market. So, you know, and we could have a lot of energy internally, but lack the pull externally. So we have to make a lot of investment to build up that awareness and engagement and pull so that, you know, people actually want the product and they want to solve the problem that you solve. So that's energy. The second one is friction. Now, friction can occur externally in the marketplace. It can also occur internally. All right, so what I mean by friction is that invisible force that we know exists, and we can't always quantify what it is, but we know how it's affecting us, right? We can't move faster, we can't accelerate. So an example of external friction would be anytime you introduce something that's somewhat disruptive to the market. And now you're asking them to change their behaviors, their workflows, their habits. And unless you have an early adopter market, and you're more mainstream, early and not early adopters, but early majority, late majority types, they're not quick to make change, right? They don't. I mean, we don't think about the things that we do every single day personally, where we'll go, yeah, that might be a better way, but I like the way I'm doing it, so I'm good with that. Now, the other thing you need to be thinking about around friction is sometimes we create friction internally and we don't even realize that it's happening. We create the kind of change that affects the way we sell the product, the way we market the product, the way we deliver the product, the way we support the product. And it's outside of the norms of the way that we do things. And that injects friction. Sometimes it's overt when someone says, no, I'm not going to do it that way, and they get angry. But oftentimes it's very passive aggressive. They just kind of dig in their heels and they go about doing their job every day, and they'll go to meetings and they'll say, yeah, that's great, I love that. But then they'll keep doing what they're doing. Third one, and that's direction. And what I mean by direction is the strategy. Do we have the right strategy? Are we going in the right direction? And are we going in that direction for the right reasons? Oh, yeah. Oh, Jim, thank you. Inertia is another force that works like friction. Making a change takes effort. Yeah. So the friction prevents you from getting inertia, but once you get the inertia, hopefully more friction isn't inserted and the inertia will continue moving it forward. So what I'm going to do, by the way, I'm doing a lot of talking here, and I got a lot of motion and slides going on here. So if you have questions along the way, please ask them. But I am planning to have plenty of time in the end so we can have tons of discussion. All right, so I want to focus on friction here for a little bit. In the interest of time that we have left, I want to look at friction. So I mentioned this earlier, and you probably had time to think about it. So as you're planning your product launch, are you identifying points of friction and removing them? Or are you creating friction and not realizing it? So one of the things I really like people to focus on is the concept of advantages and obstacles when they're launching a product. And obstacles are the obvious. These are things that are going to get in our way. And everyone goes, oh, yeah, obstacles. But what they don't realize is many of the obstacles that can prevent them from accelerating are actually inside their own walls of their company. Different kind of product. Has anybody been the, oh, you're the change agent? You're the catalyst of change? Your new product is going to send us in a new direction. Yeah, everybody loves you, don't they? Right? Because you ask finance to change the way they book deals. You ask support to, I had it, just to give you an idea. I was responsible for launching a family of products one time in my career as a product manager, and we had a total of 13 products. We sold 12 through our channels, and one of them was OEM to Symantec. And we're having a meeting one day. Every week we had launch meetings. This is a major deal, all new product, similar companies, different buyers, but big deal, big strategic deal. And so we're having this meeting, and we're talking about the topic of the day was MDF, market development funds, for partners, and returns. So this was a type of product that went into distribution. It was sold through distribution, and if we came out with a new version or a new thing, our partners wanted to return products, get a credit, and would get them the new product. Not an unusual thing to do. I'm not a finance guy, by the way, and I'm not a legal guy. So my finance person on the team said, Dave, we're good with that MDF thing, but we can't do returns. I'm a simple guy. I'm going, what do you mean you can't do returns? They call you up and say, we have 40 of them. We take them back. We give them a credit and we give them 40 of the new ones. He says, Dave, you don't understand. Our business is all cash basis. We don't have inventory in our system in the chart of accounts. So this is a publicly traded company that quietly had to do an audit, change the accounting system, put in a new chart of accounts, do another audit, and do that within the quarter to make sure that everything was good to go on the next quarterly close. So those are the kind of things that can cause tremendous friction. We would have looked like fools if we had not taken care of this, because the first time someone said, I want to send back my 40 units, my person in finance would say, sorry, can't do that. And then I would have been getting the calls. It would have been a mess, hot mess. So let's move forward, talk a little bit more about friction. All right, R&D. R&D does something, I like to look at companies like they are, we're like a tribe, right, inside our company, right? There's a lot of people working together to do something that our business does. And within those tribes, there are clans. There's different kinds of clans that exist. And sometimes we even make fun of those different clans because they have interesting little quirks that are odd to us if we're not in that clan. So R&D is a clan, right? Development is a clan, and they have certain quirks and ways of doing things that are mysterious to others outside of that clan. Marketing is another clan. They're the clan that promotes stuff. And sometimes there can be friction between development, R&D, and marketing. I've heard this might be true. And then there's another clan within the tribe called sales, and they sell stuff. Right? They have their own language and their own way of doing things, their own dialect. And sometimes there's friction between marketing and sales. The kind of internal friction I'm talking about is sometimes lying below the surface and everybody's playing nice until you come along with your launch, and now all of a sudden one of these clans blows up and we have to deal with it. So enough about this friction thing. I'm just trying to scare you. Let's talk about the 3 big lies. Let's get into that right now. The 3 big lies. All right, so lie number 1. I'm going to use our friend Pinocchio to help us guide us through these lies. And the first lie Pinocchio is going to tell us is everyone is excited about our new product. They can't wait to sell it. They can't wait to use it. They can't wait to install it, adopt it, run it, whatever. And we're all running around the building, high-fiving each other about how awesome our product is and how, we're going to be the next unicorn. That's a big lie. And let me walk Jim, hang out in the bar with the sales folks at a sales meeting, the friction surfaces very quickly. Yes, after a few drinks, Jim. All right, so after a few drinks.
It doesn't take many.
No, not at all. They love to tell stories too, don't they? All right, let's talk about some truths. Got our little angel here. They, who is the amorphous they anyway? And they are rarely as excited as you are and the immediate team members. They're just not that into you, if you want to use that phrase. Change means friction. Friction is bad. You're moving my cheese. I don't like that. Right? It's as simple as that. So you need to find a way to smooth over that friction. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. You can play the nice card, right? You can say, oh, I know it sucks. And, go all in empathy and say, I hear you, but, the market's moving that way and change is happening, man. We're in the business of change. So, get on board. And other times you got to go to someone higher up in the organization who effectively drops the hammer and says, hey guys, this is what we're going to do now. I had a situation once where the actually it was a friend of mine. So let me correct that. A friend of mine had this situation where he was brought in to help a CEO, and here was the problem: they were transitioning to a SaaS-based delivery of their product. And for those of you who've been down this path, the real secret here is SaaS isn't a different way of delivering the same product as on-prem. It's a completely different business model. So everything changes. And so the CEO's all perplexed. He's like, I'm still hanging out with my on-prem product, and I've got my SaaS product, and my sales guys keep selling the on-prem product. So my friend said, here's the simple answer. Just tell them you'll continue to accept deals on the on-prem product, but unfortunately the company can no longer pay commission on those deals. And overnight, the problem went away. All right, so you got to figure, sometimes it takes creative ways of solving these, and it requires somebody higher up to deal with it. Oftentimes when we're introducing something new, particularly if that product category has been around for a little bit, but yours is new and exciting and better and cheaper and faster and everything, you're dealing with a market of risk-averse buyers, and they're not quick to change. And so some of these, we're going to be, we're going to have $1 billion valuation in 6 months after we launch our product. It doesn't always pan out because it takes quite a bit of time to convince people who don't want to change that they want it, that it's worth changing, and the getting on the outside of that is much, much better. So let me give you some rules of the road here. Don't overcommit before the market is ready. Every organization has what I like to call the VP of overexuberance. Everyone's got one of those. That's the individual that goes around and says, nothing can go wrong, right? Absolutely nothing. They're the cheerleader of cheerleaders. They overlook obvious risks. They're just manic in their way forward. And you got to be careful with those kind of people because they can set an expectation that just can't be realized. So be careful of the VP of overexuberance and don't get happy ears. If it's something new and it's going to break things, like the way we do things, workflow, sell, market, and so forth, focus on a narrower set of those buyers. Look at the part of the market that has early adopters, carve out who they are, and focus the entire organization on those early adopters who are willing to take the risk. Make them happy, do whatever you got to do. Don't open up the floodgates to everybody. This might be a good time to think about having a limited availability release where you only let special people into the club. And finally, be patient. You might want to pound your fist on the desk and stomp on the floor and go running to your boss and saying, this group isn't doing what they're supposed to do and so forth. But remember, if you're asking them to do things differently and it's wildly different, it's just going to take them time. All right, you ready for line number 2? Sandra, your sales force will have early adopters too. You mean they'll have a sense for who those early adopters are, so they can be an early warning system for you to say, hey, stay away from this type of customer. Here are the kind of characteristics we should be looking for. So Pinocchio says this about line number 2. Everyone knows what to do on the launch team. After all, we're professionals. All right, so here's the deal. Here's what you need to know, the truths. 1, everybody who's hired into your company has a day job. I'm willing to bet you a bottle of wine that not a single one of them has in their duties and responsibilities anywhere it says product launch. Maybe we say, oh, that falls under duties as assigned. Rarely is somebody hired to manage and drive a product launch. Now, I will say this about product marketing or product management, that might be in there, but think about everyone else. Do you think someone from finance has that in their job description? No. How about sales? No. How about support? No. Right? So go down the list. Other than on the product and product marketing side, no one. So they're going to focus on how they're going to be measured, and their boss is going to make sure that that happens. Right? Product launch for them is a secondary responsibility. It always will be. You'll have a few that, are really good, but by and large, don't expect them to operate as if it's their full-time position, because it isn't. The other thing about launching, and they get confused about what their roles and responsibilities are. Who's accountable for what? And who do I go to get answers about different things? And so frequency in product launches really, really matters. And what I mean by that is, if you're in the kind of organization that launches product with some cadence, some frequency, you build knowledge, right? You build organizational knowledge, you build experience, you refine your processes, you have a good sense of, we're launching this kind of product in this kind of environment, we need to take this path as opposed to this other path, and you know what those things are. But I was recently introduced to the building materials industry. I spoke at a couple of their events, and I was like, oh, building materials, sheetrock, shingles, lumber, doors, windows, building materials. I was shocked at how infrequently they launch products. And after a while, it was explained to me, yeah, how often do you change shingles? I mean, think about it. I just had to have my roof redone. I mean, how many times have you been out shopping for shingles? How often do they change? Not very often. So these kind of organizations don't have any frequency. Yeah, 20, 30-year lifespan on shingles, right? And so they looked at me like, you and I are talking the same language. They were looking at me like I'm a man from the future. And I've came in to tell them about all of this. And I didn't have the heart to say, this is like every day in tech. Like, if we don't launch products, we're dead, right? We're always doing something. So anyway, so they don't have any tribal knowledge, any processes at all. So let's look at rules of the road here. Some things you can do to help you out. Allow time for the cadence of your business. Your effort in launching the product is only going to go as fast as the slowest cog in that wheel. You can run at light speed, but if you have someone on your team or an organization that moves at glacier speed, your launch is moving at glacier speed. The only way you're going to fix that is get the slow pokes out of the way and find somebody else to put on the team, or just go home, have a glass of wine, and just say, you know what, that we can't move that fast, so modulate accordingly. Just change your expectation. Right. Another one is, when it comes to a successful product launch, you got to assign accountability for the launch success to one person. One person has to be driving the bus. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into an organization, big organizations with brand names and admire. And I say, well, who do you have that's your launch director? And they go, well, it's sort of a group responsibility. We kind of do this and do that. And then my response to that is, so a launch is a really major initiative, right? Oh, yeah, it's big, right? It could make or break your numbers for the year, right? Oh, yeah. So your other major initiatives that you do, give me some examples of those. And they would give me some, and I'd say, so did you have somebody in charge of those initiatives? Oh yeah, every single time. So I'd say, then why is launch any different? Right. And if you don't launch with some frequency or cadence, or you do, but your personnel changes over frequently enough where you can't build that operational knowledge, just go get some help. There's plenty of people out there that I can help you. Plenty of people can help you. All right. Pinocchio's lie number 3. You ready? All right, here we go. It's a marketing thing. Product launch. Once they generate some demand, it's going to be clear sailing, man. Right? This is the biggest lie of the 3 that I just gave you. It is not a marketing thing. A launch is a major corporate initiative. It involves virtually every single person, every single functional area in your organization. Maybe not every person, but certainly every functional area. You got to make sure finance has what they need to book the revenue and account for it. You got to make sure that salespeople know how to talk about the product and find the right opportunities. We need to make sure that the marketing team, yes, does the thing that they need to do. Support, customer success, everybody is involved in some form or fashion in a launch. And thinking about a launch as purely, an email blast or updating the website, or hey, thanks, you're very welcome, Scott, or it's some a webinar or a podcast. I mean, those are tactics. They might be necessary for a successful launch, but they're tactics. In marketing, I know you guys have had this because I was on the other side of the table. I was on the product marketing side of the table, and you're sitting across from me, and I'm asking you a lot of basic questions. So who do you think the target market is for this product? And I'd get this broad brushstroke definition. And I'd usually do something that looks like this right now, where I put my head down and rub my forehead, and I'd say, maybe we could narrow that down a little bit. So describe to me your ideal customer profile. And then we'd spend another 35, 40 minutes. And what I would get is I would get information about users. I wouldn't get information about buyers, right? Jim, why are now are we having the first meeting? So we should have been talking about this earlier on, but I can assure you that there are so many companies that spend all of their energy and focus on building it and designing it and refining it, that the part about, the target market and let's say the development time window was pretty significant. Let's say you have more of an enterprise product where it might take 12, 18 months to get all the way through it. They're burning all the capital to build the product. And they're not quite sure about who the target market is. Well, it's people who do this kind of job. Well, where do they have this kind of job? Well, lots of different places. But I will say this, Jim. Some companies have better discipline around this than others, but it's a scant few. It really is. It's a scant few. Even the big companies. Yeah. I'm no longer surprised anymore, Jim. So let's talk about how we deal with this. Well, so here's what happens, right? Now I'm going to give you an oversimplified example here, so bear with me. We get the green light. We can go forward. We work with the design team. We come up with the design of the product, at least at a high level. Then there's this big push to build the product. There's a lot of energy and time and focus. And I recognize there's build that goes back to design and design back to build. So there's some arrows going on in there. And then we get down to the wire and we go, oh man, we got to have the marketing meeting. So way out here on the right is the launch planning. which happens from Friday to Monday. And launch planning is just an afterthought. We can do better, folks, and your products can be much more successful. So let's talk about the truths here. Product launch is a team sport. It's not someone walking through and dictating everything. It's a lot of points of view, different professional knowledge that's providing things like, I learned, our accounting system can't do that. Well, what do you mean? How hard could it be? It's only arithmetic. Yeah, that was my smart alecky response. Yeah, I deliberately made that, Jim, so it bled off to the slide at the end of the slide. Another thing is, when you're launching a brand new product that's a strategic initiative for the company, do yourself a favor and get an executive sponsor. Executive sponsors do a great job of representing the launch team at the executive table, and they're fantastic to help you get resources or help you navigate a complex organization. Think of them more like a mentor that can help you guide through and know who to talk to and set up meetings and figure things out, particularly those of you in big organizations where you have 14 different versions of the same thing. And then promotional part, the marketing part, is just one part of a successful product launch. And sometimes you need a whole lot of it, sometimes you don't need much of it. But the point is, it's not just a marketing thing. So what do we do about that? Let's talk about that. One, you got to include a broad range of expertise and talents. So the way I like to view it is, there's an inner circle of your team, and these are the people that, without their insight and skill and knowledge, the launch is going to fail. And then outside of that is a bigger circle of people that you need to help make sure that it's a successful launch. But if you didn't have them, it would be hard, but you would get around that. And then on the outside of that are what I would call the SMEs, the subject matter experts. These are the people you need to go to from time to time to get insight on a very narrow and specific thing, but they don't need to be there on a regular basis. I told you about getting an executive sponsor and why that's important, particularly for a major initiative, a big launch. And then, of course, as the slide pointed out, you got to start planning your launch way before the product's ready, right? And if you're going to err on the side of way too early, then, so let me explain to you what goes on. And for those of you who experience this, please chime in. In some organizations, the people who need to get involved in the launch are somewhat gently excluded because the development team doesn't want to expose what they're working on. They have sort of this closed door thing going on. And then what happens is you get blindsided because it's too late, because they're like, oh, the product's done and we're ready to go. And you're like, well, we don't have enough time. Yeah. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about me and what I do, 30 seconds only, and then I'm going to open it up to the floor. So I got this thing called the BrainKraft Product Launch Framework. Notice there's no squares, arrows, and boxes. It's circles. Why? Because a launch isn't a single process, it's an interlocking set of processes. So the framework provides structure. I have a class that teaches methods and techniques about how to apply this to your launch. And we actually use your launch as the way of teaching the class. We don't have a hypothetical thing that you have to kind of guess of how it fits. So that's the knowledge component. And the third part is advisory. So that's helping you, after you learn how to do it, to adapt the framework to your organization, add things that aren't here, maybe change the words, add different, if some of you have stage gates, specific gates you have to fall through, we can add things like that. So that's the insight. So that's my 30 seconds on that. You can find me at brainkraft.com, and I'm ready. I'm wide open. So I have a poster for you if you want to download it. Some of you already have it. There's a QR code. You can hit it and you can get the PDF for it without any form or anything. But let's open it up. Questions, thoughts?
Good stuff.
Thank you, Jim.
You've lived it.
I've lived it. I'm only giving you a fraction of it. Let me add one more element. What if you're in the United States working for a product manager and working for a German company that has a German development team that belongs to a union? Let me add that twist to it.
Well, we bought the German company, and they weren't a union shop, but there were plenty of challenges. Yeah.
Yeah, I walked into it. I didn't have a choice.
Even just globalization as a whole introduces so many complexities into the launch plan where, oh, we need the software translated to multiple languages, and somebody on development team thinks, oh, well, this shouldn't be that hard, until they realize that there's languages in other alphabets, and some of the languages go left to right, some of them go right to left, some of them go
some have double byte characters.
Yeah.
Well,
and
the English word is this big and the German word is that big, right?
Yeah, and they all come out of the woodwork, and you realize that, you know, the neatly alphabetized menus you had that made sense in English suddenly don't make sense in half of the user interfaces.
I got to tell you, Tom, I have never in 3 decades had someone from my development team go, oh, that'll be easy. Never. They always go, oh my God, that's impossible. Are you kidding me? And then they have an answer on Monday. That's the way it usually works.
The other interesting challenge I've seen, and I think especially kind of given the development occurring in sprints, and we think it'll be ready, you know, we're estimating next quarter we should be ready to launch this thing.
Yeah.
And then the scramble when either features drop out because you ran into some issues, and you know it has to launch by sales kickoff for the year.
Right.
So we're stripping off half the features that you were going to lead all the marketing content with, or the flip side of that, and you know, oh, we're not launching this quarter. We're launching a quarter after that, and what the challenges are to pivot within that and not lose momentum.
Yeah, Tom, I have a rule of thumb that I developed. Never set a launch date for the end of a quarter. Always set it for the beginning of the quarter for exactly what you just said. There's always a technical issue that comes up, something that's outside of our control. And, you know, maybe a third party you're using does something and breaks some major part of the product. And, you know, by setting a launch date at the beginning of the quarter, you have that wiggle room to at least maybe make it with and still get it within the quarter. So that's a freebie. I'll just throw that one in.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great strategy. I like that.
The other thing, especially talking about you know, our global teams, avoid having launch team meetings on Mondays and Fridays. Avoid them at all costs, because our colleagues in Europe have a bank holiday every other week on a Monday or a Friday, right? So it's an important thing to recognize. It's reality. It's the way it works. You know, there are a few, you know, globally there are a few Thursday holidays, but they're not nearly as many as the Monday, Friday bank holidays. So that's that was an eye opener for me. Another eye opener for me, everybody, was for a long time I would have a representative of development sitting in on my launch team, and to a certain point it was okay. But then I started discovering that people weren't showing up for the launch meetings. And when I talked to a few people to ask them why, they said, Dave, that guy you have in there from development all he does is talk about features and design issues and everything for an hour. I can never get a word in edgewise. Then I talked to a few more and I got the other pattern, right? They naturally, I'm a recovering developer, so we naturally will go into the details, the real intricate details for which nobody else in the room cares about or on the call. And so I learned this pattern. Tuesday, as the product manager, I had my meeting with the dev team. They gave me the update. I represented product in the launch team, and that was the end of that. And I did that on Wednesday. So Tuesday, then Wednesday, and then that's, middle of the week was good. Sander, you're right. Middle East tends to take Fridays off, but they do work Sunday.
Some of them have the weekend Friday, Saturday, and some have the weekend as Thursday, Friday.
Yeah.
Which was an extra challenge when we had some products in the Middle East. The only productive days were Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, where we could get the whole team on board.
There you go. Again, you have to modulate, but do what works for you. And some of my folks said, well, let's have the meeting on Monday because that's the beginning of the week and all that. And then we ran into all these bank holidays. I'm like, oh. And then they said, well, let's do it on Friday because everyone will get done and we'll have it. By Friday, they're exhausted. Their brains are fried. They're like, I just want to go into the weekend at this point. So, and then we just wouldn't get anybody to show up on Friday. So yeah, middle of the week, Wednesday seemed to be like the magic day at least it was for me.
So Dave, a question. If you have a new product that you're launching and the salespeople and marketing are quite caught up in trying to sell the existing products, which have an existing market that they've had for a few years,
Mm-hmm.
but how do you get them to be as enthused about breaking a new product into a new market?
Okay.
Where they would rather do the easy thing and get their commissions from selling a product that's already established.
Well, I'm gonna defend my friends in sales, and it's not that they're doing the easy thing, they're taking the least path of resistance to achieve what they're being measured on, right? Because you and we launch a product and screws up, we get to go at it again. We get to go back in the playground and play again. They, not so much, right? They're gone. I mean, I've worked in companies that had the 2-quarter rule, right? You had 1 quarter to build a pipeline, and if you didn't have anything going by the 2nd quarter, you're out. So not all are that way, but some are, and they still are. Now, here's what I would do, and I've used this technique and it works. If you got a sales force that's focused on selling current products to hit their quota for the year, and you're launching your product at the last half of the year, and think about what the length of the sales cycle is. So if I'm launching a product in October, and the average sales cycle length of the buying decision is 6 to 9 months, I'm not going to get anyone's attention. Forget it. Just forget it. But I can get some people's attention. So I once had this situation where I worked with a VP of sales in the company I work for, who's also a friend of mine. And he loaned me a couple of sales reps that were not doing so great. They were good sales reps otherwise, but they weren't doing so great in terms of building a pipeline and closing deals and so forth. So he basically said, I'm thinking about cutting these guys loose in the next 4 to 6 months. If there's anything you can do to work with them, great. And so I worked with my boss. And what we did is we looked at our early adopter, our lighthouse customers that we there's a little bit of sleight of hand here. So hang on. There's a little, I won't call it a dirty trick, but there's a little bit of a technique going on here. So what we wound up doing is we wound up working with finance and working with a couple of reps, and we introduced them into the accounts that were the lighthouse accounts, and we wound up giving them the credit for closing the deal. Right. And there was some strong objection within the launch team to do that, because they're like, and wait a minute, we did all the work. You basically handed it to them. My boss was mentoring me on this, and he goes, don't worry about that. So we're leading into kickoff, right? So sales kickoff is going to be in a couple of months. So now we got 2 reps that have each closed a couple of deals and received commission for it, right? That's the important thing. So what we wound up doing is working with those reps, and we built a presentation for them out of the marketing team that would just knock your socks off. And then we worked with those 2 reps to practice delivering that presentation. I mean, they could do that presentation if they came out of a coma. They could do it so well, right? Boom, hop up off the table and give the presentation. And we had them on stage for 30 minutes at the kickoff, and they got up there and they said, let me tell you how we won these deals for the company. And, you know, what happened was exactly what my boss said would happen. And I'm gonna use a little colorful language. So we had all of these reps, and we're talking like 500, 600 reps in his ballroom, right? And these 2 knuckleheads were up there talking about how they closed the deal. And you should have seen the room. You know, the top sales reps were going, you could see them talking to each other, right? But the heads going back and forth. And they were later on over drinks, Jim. They were saying, you know, look, if those 2 knuckleheads can close deals, I can do 10 times as much. And we were right there going, you know what? You're right. You can. You could knock this one out of the ball. And you know what? We're here to support you. And it worked. I did that in 3 companies, and it worked every single time.
Brilliant.
I didn't come up with it. My boss did, but
So brilliant.
He's the brilliant one, but it worked. You know, and they're just like grousing about how better they are and how those knuckleheads, you know, I actually didn't say that. I said morons, I think was the word that they used. Yeah, it's priming the pump. That's exactly it, John. Priming the pump, right? So you're always looking for, how do I stack the deck in the favor of a successful launch? What haven't I thought about? What friction do I need to remove? I didn't even bring this up today. How many of you, and you don't have to answer this, just think about it. How many of you define the launch objectives? I like using OKRs, but launch OKRs that define a successful launch before you even get into the deep planning process? In my experience, it's like 1 out of 10, maybe 2 out of 10, maybe. They're like, oh, we had a successful launch. Oh, well, how did you define said success? Well, what do you mean? We sold a lot of stuff. Well, how much is a lot? Well, we sold a lot. Sales is happy. I'm like, well, maybe you could have sold twice as much. Nah, everyone's happy. So, you know, sometimes we set objectives that are way too lofty and set an expectation that can't be fulfilled, and we look foolish. And other times we don't set any objective at all, and success is sales got their presentation, marketing updated the website, and we got a few videos done. All right. And maybe some tweets, you know, can't leave the tweets out.
One question I think a number of folks will have, given the representation we have kind of in go-to-market diversity in our group. I know some people are dealing with consumer products where, you know, if it's a website-based tool, there's no sales force per se. It's like, all right, it's live, it's on the net. how do we get the ball rolling on that end? And then
Right.
other end of the spectrum, we have folks that sell through, distributors, and it's just distributor salespeople. And then you have to do a 1-2 punch to get the distributors on board. And then once you've got them on board, you've got to figure out how to get your product ahead of the other things that they have in their giant catalog.
Right.
So maybe a few words about those two options as far as when you've got no salespeople or you've got distributors who own the salespeople.
Yeah. Great question, Tom. And then Jim, I saw your hand was up. Well, I'll get to you. When it comes to distribution, there's another big lie when it comes to distribution, and that is if we give our distributors enough margin, they'll sell our product over all others. That would be lie number 4 if we had distributors in there, and that's just simply not the case. Unless you have a scenario where your distributor, your reseller is only selling your category of product, your product in a category that they sell, then fine. And you've got some levers to pull, but oftentimes they're selling 2, 3, maybe more products within the same product category, right? They're looking at solving customer problems, and this engagement might be your product, and another engagement, it might be your competitor. Their allegiance isn't there. But what you can do is you need to always remember that at the end of the day, for the reseller, it's all about, can we make money with your product and with a minimum of amount of investment and time on our part? That's it, right? If you make it easy for them to make money, they will make money for you, right? If you make it harder for them to make money than your competitor, then they're going to gravitate to your competitor. And, they're going to expect you to drive demand. They're going to expect you to create the authority around your product. They're going to expect all of that. So don't think you can walk away from all of that just by bumping up the margin for them and giving them a few more points. Because it might work it's just like commission with your sales guys, right? Your sales team, giving them a great spiff doesn't guarantee they're going to sell your product over the other products. That typically falls apart if it's too hard. Now, when it comes to selling without a sales force, your website, your e-commerce system becomes your top salesperson. That's just the way to look at it. And so the kind of things that you would map out for a direct sales force, or BDRs, SDRs, whatever you call them, it still comes into play. Just the thing is, it's all automated, right? You still need to know who is your buyer, what is their buying criteria, what's important to them, what's not, how do they make a buying decision. It's the same kind of stuff. The difference is you got to do the work up front because you don't have the human element. So there's more promotional activities involved, certainly more marketing, more awareness building, more thought leadership. There's a lot more that has to go on. Maybe you're heavy into direct response, and it's the same kind of thing, except your best sales rep is your e-commerce system, your e-commerce platform, or your website. Right, Jim, you had a question, sir?
Yeah, I really appreciated the advice about getting an executive sponsor. Wondering if you've had experience bringing in ones other than like a VP of marketing and how that went.
Yeah. So my first experience with this, we had, I was working for a software company in Phoenix, and we were having a total train wreck when it came to launching products. So that's when they brought in and formed the PMO, Project Management Office, and brought project managers in, to basically herd cats to help us out. And they did a fantastic job. But we got to a point where it was that product line that I had with 13 products. And they said, hey, on this next major launch, one of the things we're going to do starting forward is anything that's like a big tier 1 launch, major initiative, we're going to assign an executive sponsor. And I went, oh, this is going to be cool. And then I got the email. My executive sponsor is going to be the CFO. A publicly traded company CFO. And I'm like, good Lord, the guy who blasts my email or my expense reports is now going to be my executive. This is going to be a nightmare. And I went into it, with a lot of trepidation, and what wound up being, what turned out to be an incredibly amazing experience, because the CFO, he was a CFO of a publicly traded company. So quarterly earnings calls were a big deal. And dealing with institutional investors is something that he pretty much did all day long if it wasn't something related to regulatory compliance. So he was like a kid in a candy store because he was back into the core of what the business did. And he loved learning about it. And he would take me to lunch, and we do like every couple of weeks, we'd go on just a lunch and have a checkup. And I remember one time the development team needed some resources. And our CIO at the time was basically stonewalling us and saying, we'll get we'll get what you need when we can get to it. And I'm having lunch with Mark, the CFO, and he goes, so any issues you need to worry about? Well, says there's only one. He goes, well, what's that? He goes, well, CIO is not able to get the gear that the development needs to complete the testing and so forth and so on. And he goes, well, what is he telling you? And blah, 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 blah. Turns out the CIO in this company reported to the CFO. And so the CFO picks up the phone. He goes, hold on a second, makes a phone call. And that call didn't even last 4 minutes. And he goes, you'll have what you need next Wednesday. I said, awesome. Because I painted the picture. If we don't get the product out, you may not have something to talk about in the earnings call. So that, boom, things happened very, very quickly.
Cool.
I can tell you who not to have, though, Jim.
Yeah.
The VP of sales and the VP of development.
Yeah, I was wondering about those dev especially.
No. The VP of sales, you'll never get a hold of. You'll never be able to engage with them in any meaningful period of time. And they will, they'll freak out if any discussion comes up about something not being in the product or will be in the product, right? Priorities. They freak out like instantaneously. So keep that one in mind.
I can imagine what happens with the VP of dev, but go ahead.
No, VP of dev is always going to be in a defensive position around the product, right? And they don't always have the executive clout at the table that they think they have.
Because they're a cost center, not a revenue center.
Sadly, yeah, that's the way it's looked at.
Any
Cool.
Hey,
thoughts?
David.
Great stories. Thanks.
Welcome.
Hey, David, this is Donna. Great presentation, good information. I have a question. What's the difference between a launch and go-to-market GTM, or is launch part of a GTM?
Yeah, I did a blog post on that recently because I get that question a lot. In some companies, GTM and launch are synonymous, right? They just use that term. What's our GTM plan? And it's like, okay, get it. That's what you call it. And if I'm in there, I try to modulate what I say. But the way I look at it is I think go-to-market is an overarching strategy of which there could be multiple launches within that overall arching go-to-market strategy, right? So I think of GTM as a bigger, broader, farther reaching thing, whereas a launch is an instance within that strategy.
Great, thanks. I just pulled it up too,
Oh.
your blog.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you. Yeah.
just
Okay.
found it. Okay, thank you.
I might even had all the spelling right on that one. So. All right. Any other questions?
I had one more question, just kind of for the,
Oh, I got a good one. That Tom, yours is a good one.
yeah, because
I'm-
I've been running across this with companies like Salesforce, Amazon, Google.
Yeah.
You know, they've got a cloud-based product. There is no, like, you don't see announcements saying Gmail version, 12.3 is being released next month. Get excited, we're going to have all these new features. Just stuff just keeps appearing every week or so. So yeah, wondering how the product launch changes when your product just kind of has random features that incrementally get added many, many times in a year.
Yeah. Or in the rapid release environment, right? Get it done, push it out, get it done, push it out. Here's how I like to talk about this. A release is not a launch, and a launch is not a release, right? So a release is a technical decision, and it's a business decision on whether you want to push that out to select customers or all customers, or do you withhold it, right? You could decide to withhold that. But a launch is purely a business decision. Just because you have some code done doesn't mean you need to push it out. Now, you might want to push it out. And I know when I was in development is once I got it done, I wanted it off my plate so I can move on to the next thing. But today that's more of an infrastructure decision, right? How I compartmentalize the app and who gets what and when they get it and for what reasons. The thing I want you to be thinking about though is there are negative aspects to frequent updates to a product. And I run into it in some of the SaaS products that I use. And it really annoys me when I have to call support about something and they turn around and go, oh, that feature's in the product. Let me show you. I'm like, I didn't know it was in the product, right? So, and I've had to deal with organizations whose sales reps are saying, I'm getting calls from customers about stuff I didn't even know existed, or support is hearing about support calls about things that were released and they weren't in the proper communication channels. So rapid release is awesome for certain categories of products. But if you're doing a rapid release on big products that affect a business's workflow and you're breaking that workflow on a regular basis, you won't have a customer for very long. Right? Now, Salesforce gets away with it. They version to some degree. I mean, there's some people on the older version of the SaaS though it's all SaaS, but older version and newer version, and they got to migrate them over and so forth. But I don't have the best answer for that question yet, Tom. I think there are companies that do a better job than others about like when you log in, hey, let me tell you about what's new. And they show you, hey, click here and we'll walk you through it. But that's well and good for you and me. But what about the clerk who's using an app who has no decision over whether a feature gets implemented or not? Or that business who come Monday logs in and suddenly finds that they can't service their customers because something's changed and they didn't get a chance to update everybody on it. If anyone has a good answer to that one, I'd love to hear it because it is a common problem today. It's a very common problem. Okay, your answer is the same as mine then. Yeah, Red Hat basically said, we're going to take all this chaos and we're going to create something standardized. right? We'll run it through our QA process. We'll do this, we'll do that. That way you can trust it for at an enterprise level. Yeah. All right. Well, that's all I got. It's 10:10 here.
Yeah, so if, unless somebody chimes in with something, we've got Teresa had a comment that stealth releases are an example of not taking the customer perspective into account.
Yeah.
Definitely seen that once or twice. And usually it's the tech support operations folks that have to remind you of, hey, that wasn't cool.
Right, right. And once it wasn't cool, the second time it happens, the meeting's not so nice.
Exactly, exactly. All right, with that, I think we'll wrap up here. I'd like to thank all of you for coming. Please keep an eye on the website for the upcoming meetings and activities. I'd like to thank our speaker, Dave Daniels. He did a great job. This was fantastic information. I think those of us that have been in product management for any length of time have been through various degrees of product launches, with some more happy experiences, some were less so. But it's always great to hear from somebody who's got a broad perspective and has been through a lot more of those experiences than the rest of us. So it's great to get some advice and see the range of activities out there and some general principles. Again, just a little reminder, you can download the framework poster. The QR code is still up there. If anyone has missed this presentation, feel free to keep an eye on the YouTube channel and on the website, and we will be posting this within the next week or two. So feel free to forward that in, and then it will also be listed in the archive. So if you ever need to refer back to this and you can't remember who said what, you can go back and have a peek at the archives. And with that, thank you all for coming. We look forward to seeing you at next month's meeting, and we'll see you all then. Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Everyone have a good evening.